Okay, so yeah, like I said last time, 2018 happened to be one of the best movie years of my lifetime. I mean, sure, I haven't seen as many as I have the last couple of years, because, well, you know. But still, I saw so many good movies. I would say at least 60% of the movies I've seen this year ranged from a 7 out of 10 and above. And that's not even taking into account some movies I haven't seen yet. Mary Poppins Returns, Aquaman, Vice on the Basis of Sex, and A Star is Born. Now once again, I'm keeping my honorable mentions to 8, but all of these are really good movies that I think you should see. But for the actual honorable mentions, Unfriended Dark Web. I like the first one, but this is so much better. The acting is great, it's well edited, and I was on the edge of my seat throughout most of it. Sorry to bother you. The They Live of the 2010s, it's not only really funny, but works as a satire on the evils of unregulated capitalism with some really out there stuff. July 22nd, a Netflix movie about the 2011 Norway attacks that is extremely relevant today and has many themes from survivor's guilt to having to defend the indefensible. Isle of Dogs, a very just nice movie to watch. I love the characters, it was funny and kind of charming in its own quirky way. Paddington 2, just like the first, it's so charming, likable, and fun that even the most cynical grumpy pants would have a hard time hating it. Ralph Breaks the Internet, stupid title, but a really good sequel that expands the characters, has some great jokes, and a fantastic ending. The Cloverfield Paradox, screw the haters, I was invested the whole time. I like these characters and the ending left me with my mouth wide open. And finally, Black Panther, just a very good movie that creates an interesting world and one of the best Marvel villains to date. But now that we're done with those, let's move on. We're counting down my top 10 favorite movies of 2018. Number 10.
Yeah, fine, release me. Just say it. Just fucking say it.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother! Do you understand?
This is a movie I've actually come to appreciate even more over the past few months. I'm not normally one who's into these sort of art housey horror films. I mean, I just slammed Slender Man yesterday, but this one actually did really click with me. I think it mostly comes down to the acting. Toni Collette is fucking amazing in this. Seriously, Oscar worthy. Seeing her slowly descend into madness and despair is haunting. She is scary good. But everyone else is great too. Gabriel Byrne is the dad who is trying his damnedest to keep this family together. Millie Shapiro plays a good creepy child, and the scene where she's having an allergic reaction is genuinely uncomfortable. And then there's the son, played brilliantly by Alex Wolff. You remember him, the little brother from the Naked Brothers band, that late 2000s Nick show? Yeah, now he's acting in fucked up horror movies and playing real-life terrorists. The camera work and music create some great atmosphere, and the fact that it's set in an old house in a very secluded place just makes it creepier. The fact that I knew almost nothing about this before going to see it made the experience even better. There is stuff that happens in this film that I won't even hint at because this is a film that you just need to see as blind as possible. And it manages to build up in a way that it can scare you with very little, like that clicking sound. That was all over the first act, but then when it happens in the last act, a woman in a few rows ahead of me actually jumped. Both the horror and family drama work together. Compare that to something like It Comes at Night, where the horror stuff was great, but the family drama stuff just felt like it was getting in the way. I wanted this family to make it through. Now it can be pretty hard to watch, which might explain why it has a D+ on Cinema Score. You have to be prepared to watch this. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the ending. It did go on for a little bit, but I could see some people saying it's one of the best endings in years. It did make over 8 times its budget, but I still think it was one of the more underrated movies of the year. If anything, it's interesting and it's stuck in my memory.
Would've gave you anything, would've gave you everything. It's time to get
Number 9.
What are you doing?
My job. You're the one who said I was ready, and I frankly disagree with you. But here we are, trying to overcome our differences. Like Beyonce says, please stop cheating on me.
Hey,
This probably won't be that long because I really don't have much to say. You can just go watch what I said about the first movie in my favorites of 2016 video and just copy that here. It's a very funny, the action is good, great even, that highway chase is one of the highlights of the year, Ryan Reynolds kills it as Deadpool, and it's oddly kind of sweet in its own fucked up way. I mean sure, they're basically a bunch of douchebags, but they love and care for each other. This basically takes everything from the first film, brings it over, and makes it even bigger. I love the little relationship between Deadpool and Fire Fist. Domino is just plain awesome, and Cable is actually a pretty sympathetic villain. Yeah, he was a crazed monster at points, but I completely understood why he was. This is just a very solid sequel. I don't think I like it quite as much as the first movie. One, the first film did feel more fresh. While this does add stuff, it also has a lot of repeat. Sort of what some said about Guardians 2, but I thought that actually outdid the original in every way. Here, it's still really funny, but there are a couple of jokes that did bomb kind of hard for me, including what they did with X-Force. But otherwise, it's still a great movie, and that's really all I have to say. Moving on. Number 8. So like I said, Blumhouse has been pretty consistently good the past couple of years, Truth or Dare being the exception, but of all the movies they released in 2018, I'd say this is my favorite.
Hi.
I liked Venom. I did, but this movie came out a few months earlier, had sort of the same premise. I mean, tonally, the endings were completely different, but the gist of a disabled man being controlled by something inside of them that gives them superhuman abilities while he can hear the voice in his head, basically the premise for both films. And this is a much better movie. In fact, this is a much better version of several movies. It's about the dangers of artificial intelligence and how it can get out of hand, and in my opinion, it does that in a much more interesting way than 2001: A Space Odyssey. The ending is kind of like Ex Machina, and this did it better, but the one that surprised me, remember that shitty 2013 movie The Host? The one based on the Stephenie Meyer book that had the alien inside Saoirse Ronan's head? Well, the way they handled that premise was awful, leading to one of the worst movies of the decade. Here, the voice in the head thing actually kind of works. So congrats, The Host. I can't even give you the benefit of the doubt anymore. You just sucked at everything. The movie is actually pretty funny. I mean, it is a horror movie first and foremost, but there is a decent amount of comedy, and it works. It doesn't clash with the tone, it works in this situation. Him and the AI going back and forth just feels natural. The main character is really likable, and Logan Michael Green is fantastic. Not only giving a good performance, but also physically he is great. And that leads to the action. This has some of the most unique action scenes I've seen in years. The camera work is so good, it just feels different from a lot of other action out there. And it's wonderfully violent too. I don't think I've gone, oh shit, that much in a long time. As far as negatives, there's a subplot with a cop that in the end is pretty much completely pointless. And even though I love the ending, like it's one of those endings that I feel I should hate, but I actually kind of loved, it does make me wonder, what is he gonna do now? I don't really know what his plan is. But Upgrade is a film I want more people to see. Stay tuned for Norty's Forgotten Flicks of it sometime in 2019. Number 7. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. When I saw the first trailer, I was hyped. I just thought it was a genius idea. Now, of course, there have been movies where you have to be quiet so a blind monster can't hear you, like Tremors and Don't Breathe, and yes, I do count Stephen Lang as a monster in that film, but here, it is the entire world. It is something that affects the characters' lives from the very beginning to the very end. You get to see how they live from day to day. They never close doors. They have sand on the ground to make as little noise as as possible. They have to use sign language, which, to be fair, they're already pretty good at since their daughter is deaf. And they even created a soundproof room for when the mother has to deliver her baby. These are really smart characters, and I love them. As I've said, my favorite horror movies are the ones that include a really relatable, likable family. Stuff like the original Poltergeist, Paranormal Activity 2, and the Conjuring movies. They all clearly love each other, the parents will do anything to make sure the kids are safe, and the kids act like actual kids. They're scared obviously, but they know when to keep quiet. The sound mixing in this movie is excellent. It gets you invested. When I saw this in the theater, everyone in the audience knew to shut the hell up, and it was amazing. The scariest thing that could possibly happen in this movie is just hearing any sound. But unlike movies where that's used as a cheap jump scare, here it actually is scary. It serves a purpose. The atmosphere creates so much tension that you'll probably be curled up like a ball by the end of it. It's very well acted, and the climax was great with one of the best final shots of the year. The only small problems are that it can get a bit repetitive. Thankfully it's only 90 minutes. And the monsters themselves are pretty uncreative in their design. They're basically just the xenomorphs mixed with the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. But that's a nitpick. A Quiet Place is a new horror classic that I will look forward to watching every October. If you haven't seen it yet, turn off the lights, get either surround sound or headphones, and give it a watch.
It's time to get
Number 6. Just a couple months ago, before Ralph Breaks the Internet came out, a lot of people were complaining, based on the trailer, that it was just going to be a bunch of references and it was completely terrible just from the trailer. This pissed me off because we already went through this at the beginning of the year. There are objectively better movies than Ready Player One that did not make the list, and the last 4 movies probably were objectively better than this. Most people would probably not put this on a top 10 movies of the year list, even if they liked it. I am not like most people. Sure, I take into account stuff like story and characters, which this movie is basically a bunch of stereotypes running around in a big corporations are bad and must be stopped story, but what I take into account even more is the amount of fun I have while watching something. And I had a goddamn blast with this film. This is exactly the kind of cliche pandering that I love, but don't take that as me saying that this doesn't have effort. This movie clearly had a lot of love and passion put in, and the sort of nostalgic whimsy that it has is something only Spielberg could pull off. The effects work is absolutely phenomenal, and I love this world and how it's designed. With a lesser director, it could have come across as too cluttered, but I 100% wanted to live here. It is so beautiful and fun, but it's not just a bunch of references. There actually is a story here. It may not be the most complex story, but I was invested. I like the leads, the conflict was engaging, and it has some commentary about how we shouldn't let technology run our lives, and that anyone can lie about who they are online. Plus, it shows that Spielberg, despite being in his 70s, can still direct one hell of an awesome action scene. This got a lot of shit before it came out, especially after it showed the Iron Giant firing weapons, despite the fact that he is not a gun. That's not the real Iron Giant. It's a machine built by some teenager who just thought it looked cool. Look, I am not someone who complains that people judge movies before they come out. In fact, that's kind of getting annoying to me too. But could you at least stop and think that maybe one of the best directors alive will make a movie that is more than just cheap references? I'm not saying it's a flawless movie. It has some really bad exposition at the beginning, and the villain is cliche as fuck, and it certainly isn't groundbreaking, but no movie this year gave me such pure, uncomplicated joy. And in a year like 2018, that is something I really needed.
It's time to get
Number 5. This movie should go down as the definition of a solid sequel. It takes most of what made the first movie a modern day classic and either continues with it or even improves it. To me, what makes the first movie one of my favorites is this family, and here they are still as lovable. And in fact, this actually does a better job incorporating all of them. The first was definitely mostly focused on Mr. Incredible, while the rest were more supporting characters. Here, they all get a good amount of screen time, and each does a fair amount in saving the day. And it also expands on the characters. Helen feeling pride in being the one saving the day, and Bob feeling jealous that he has to stay home while she's out there doing the work. It's kind of an interesting commentary on gender roles and how we just assume that it has to be the mother who stays home while the father is working. Even though I know stay-at-home dads are much more common now than they were in the 50s, it's still a harmful stereotype that I think we need to get rid of. Violet goes through teen angst after being stood up, leading to some good laughs, and Dash is still as lovably rambunctious as ever. Plus, we get a lot more with Jack, and the scene between him and the raccoon is probably the funniest scene I saw all year. I was nearly on the floor during that part. And of course, we got more Edna mode. Any movie can be improved with more Edna. All the new characters are fun too. It's nice that there are still some superheroes running around after the first movie killed off all the old ones. And speaking of which, just like the original, it's a PG film that actually earns it. Then there is the action and animation. While I think the first movie's animation still holds up, this movie looks phenomenal, and it allows for some of the most elaborate and fun action scenes to ever hit a superhero movie. The angles they get, the editing, the creative ways they use their powers, it's all so well done. Brad Bird is in his 60s now, and he's still creating some of the most enjoyable action scenes in film. So for the most part, this film not only matches the first movie, but in some aspects, it's even better. But there is one thing that is much weaker, and unfortunately, it's the villain. It's another surprise villain that Disney likes doing nowadays, and when you find out who it is, they don't have as much personality, especially compared to Syndrome. But that's really the only problem I can find in otherwise a pretty incredible sequel.
I want you to be happier. I want you to be happier. So I'll go. It's time to get
Number 4. I almost considered having this as a tie with Incredibles 2, but really looking at it, this did feel like something completely different.
I gotta get my pants. Wait, why is the voice in my head so loud?
Oh, are you okay?
I'm Miles.
I'm Gwanda.
Wait, your name is Gwanda?
Yes, it's African.
Just a quick note before we get into my thoughts. Remember in my review for the first Sam Raimi movie where I questioned if anyone caught that spider that infected Peter? Well, this movie answers it. And yes, it does infect more people. So yeah, the movie that has been plaguing my Twitter feed for the past month is really freaking good. It's basically the Fury Road of 2018. Pretty much everything people are saying is true. The plot is really interesting. It has a lot of great humor and some very touching drama. The relationship between Miles and older Peter is nice. The stuff with him and his family is goddamn heartbreaking, and the chemistry between him and Gwen Stacy is great. The animation is breathtaking and unique. It feels so much different than every other animated movie, and it leads to some phenomenal action scenes. And I'm sure over the next few years, movies will try and imitate it and will never be as good, thus making this look less interesting in comparison. But for right now, this feels so fresh. The voice acting is great. I loved Lily Tomlin as Aunt May. She was hilarious. There's so much creativity, and the music. It sounds so good, which is weird because if there's one thing I got tired of this year, it was that goddamn SoundCloud rap that's taken over the pop charts. Lil Baby and Lil Pump and Lil Door and Lil Bits and Lil Shirts and Lil Pants and Lil Underwear and all those. Goddamn, that pop music sucked this year. But this movie actually made me appreciate it more. It can sound good and actually kind of get me hyped up. Also, this movie has the best Stan Lee cameo ever. If this is his final one, then it was a great one to go out on. There's not much else to say. Everyone else is already praising the ever-loving hell out of it. My only small problems are that it may have a few too many characters that it can't develop all of them, and there are a few too many convenient moments, but those are rare, and Into the Spider-Verse is still an awesome film.
I stuck by you. You're the sunflower. You're the sunflower. It's time.
Number 3. So earlier this year, I reviewed Ghost Protocol and said it was my favorite Mission Impossible movie. Yeah, that isn't true anymore. How many series can you think of in which the 6th movie is the best in the series? Especially for a series that has spanned more than 20 years. But yeah, Mission Impossible Fallout is the best this series could possibly be, and probably one of the best spy films ever made. The plot is interesting, but not too overly complicated that it gets confusing. There's tons of twists that I didn't see coming, leaving me constantly guessing and wondering what would happen next. I like this team and genuinely wanted them to succeed, and the acting from everyone is good. I still can't believe Tom Cruise is in his mid-50s acting against Henry Cavill, who is 20 years younger and half a foot taller, and yet it looks like he can actually take him. Some of you may just think I'm fanboying over Cruise, and I just want to say, blame my mom. She's been a fangirl for years, I learned it from her. It manages to be funny, not only making fun of tropes of the series, but just spy movies in general. It looks amazing. I mean, this is a movie that One Perfect Shot page on Twitter will probably just use every frame of over the years. But the element that really makes it one of the best movies of the year is the action. Not only is there a ton of it, making a 2.5-hour movie feel shorter than it actually is, but there is a lot of variety. You want to see Cruise and Cavill jump out of a plane and see them fall in real time? You got it. Want to see them fight a martial arts expert in a bathroom, practically destroying the place in the process? You got it. Want a motorcycle chase through London that feels like it goes on forever and yet you don't mind? You got it. I was enthralled through most of this movie. That when it was over, my chest was hurting a little bit because my heart was racing so much. This movie is a goddamn action masterpiece, and the only small problem I had with it was that there's a twist involving one of the characters' allegiance. Not only did I guess that was what was gonna happen, but I was hoping it wasn't because I actually like this character. Otherwise, Fallout sets a high standard that I think any sequels will find it impossible to top. See what I did there?
It's time to get
Number 2. Holy shit. This was one of those experience movies, similar to what it must have felt like seeing Empire Strikes Back or The Matrix in theaters. Something that you just watch and think, holy shit, I just saw something big. This movie was epic. The very definition of epic. The action, every single one of them was enthralling. From the fight in New York to the final battle in Wakanda, they were creative and fun and intense. It manages to balance over a dozen characters from Iron Man to Spider-Man to all of the Guardians of the Galaxy and give them all clear motivation and let their personalities shine and create some pretty good comedy. I understand why each character does each thing they do. People complained about Star-Lord fighting Thanos when they had him pinned down, but knowing how hurt he was after he found out what Thanos did, I completely understood. Speaking of Thanos, he is one of the best villains not just of the MCU, but of the last decade. Not only is Josh Brolin phenomenal, but he is scary. He's not only a good physical threat, but he's a good manipulator. And while his plan is awful, I can totally understand his reasoning. It comes from a place of reason, even if it is unreasonable. The acting is fantastic across the board. They have great chemistry, and some line reads gave me goosebumps. I'm sure you all know the line, "I don't feel so good." But when that line was said in the movie, I genuinely got shivers down my spine. The effects are great, there's several emotional moments that don't feel forced, and it never was boring. I was always interested in what was gonna happen next. And then, of course, there was the ending, which left me stunned and had my entire theater sitting through the credits in silence. As far as big comic crossovers go, this is about as good as you can possibly get, and I don't really have to say anything else. You've all seen it. When it was over, I immediately wanted to see the next movie, and I cannot wait to see how it all concludes with Endgame later this year.
I'm losing my mind just a little. So why don't you just meet me in the middle, in the middle.
But now you're feeling it's an upbeat,
Number 1.
inspirational song about life.
I'm gonna get a little cheesy for this one.
All relationships, love or the lack of it. And what we see and hear on the screen is part of who we become.
So, before we start, I will admit that I actually didn't grow up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that much. Oh, don't get me wrong, I watched it from time to time. I don't think it's possible for anyone born after 1970 to have not seen at least one episode, but it's not one I watched every day. I was more of an Arthur and Sesame Street kid. That said, I freaking love this documentary for a number of reasons. First of all, it does a great job getting us to know Fred Rogers, the man, why he started his show, how he learned to talk to children without talking down to them, and how his religious faith played into his actions. This is probably the greatest Christian movie in years because it shows how to spread love and understanding instead of the hateful prejudice of let there be light and God's not dead, or whatever the hell Saving Christmas was. But it did show that he had flaws. It wasn't just making him out to be perfect. He did tell one of his gay co-stars that he couldn't go to gay bars anymore because it would hurt the show, and even he had a hard time looking on the bright side after 9/11. But through all of it, his message of kindness and optimism prevailed. It also shows how the show was made, which if you're like me and are interested in that kind of stuff is actually pretty fascinating. It shows how he was able to get more funding just by having a conversation with the Senate, and all the ways he was able to talk about some very serious topics in a way that children could understand. From finding ways to discuss death to using a swimming pool to show why racism and segregation is stupid. But I'm sure most of you can guess why this is my number one. It's kind of like how Inside Out was my number one movie of 2015. It's not just that it made me cry, there were actually several movies this year that made me cry, but it was a movie I needed to see this year, specifically in late August when I actually did watch it. If I had seen this in any other year, even 2015, which was objectively worse, I still would have liked it, but it would not have hit me so well. There was so much crap that happened this year, so much lying and anger and fighting, and I was miserable. I don't think a week went by where I didn't have a day where I was just sad and nothing made me happy. But then I saw this, and afterward, I just felt better. And not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but after I saw this, my life didn't get any worse. But it also made me realize something that I took for granted. Mr. Rogers had a saying, look for the helpers. There will always be those who are helping, and in a year where I was sad and angry and scared pretty much all the time, I just wanted some help. But when I look back, I realized I actually had some. From family and friends being there and helping out when I was in trouble, to people I look up to making me laugh, and well, you guys, whether it be leaving a nice comment or just listening to me vent about my frustrations. If you look for the helpers, you'll always have hope. And maybe if we take his message to heart, the world can be a better place. Maybe I can learn that lesson too, so I'm sorry for all the fuck yous. Not you guys, you can rot, but to all of you, I hope you all have wonderful lives ahead of you. So yeah, we're about to enter the last year of the decade. And like I said, I'm gonna go into 2019 with hope, just as I have every other year. I've got some ideas on how I'm gonna make my personal life better, and hopefully they'll work out. And I also have plenty of ideas for this channel and the second one that I'll hopefully get to this year. Also follow me on Twitter. I'm hoping to watch some movies from the 2010s that I've missed, and might even do some live tweets. But yeah, let's try and make 2019 great, because God, do I need it to be. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next year. Bye.
Otra como tu mami no hay. Pégate, dale, pum, bye, bye, que tú quieres ser sai. Otra como tu mami no hay. Pégate, dale, pum, bye, bye. Retumbando las bocinas de seguro. Tiene Daddy Yankee y el disco duro. Ulvi Rome, que pa' esta liga no se asome. Dura, dura, dura. Blaze.
I know I'd go back to you.